We're delighted to bring you another free webinar from Waters Correctional Outreach today about one of the hottest topics in corrections and in public safety in general, the topic of building staff wellness programs. I'm Caterina Spinaris, the moderator of our small panel discussion today, and also the founding director of Desert Waters. I would like to invite you to visit our website, if you haven't so far, at desertwaters.com to learn more about our various products and services and resources we offer and how they support staff wellness programming in corrections and beyond. You can also follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. As many of you know, building and maintaining a staff wellness program can be a daunting task, from conception to implementation to sustainability. Often factors like the corrections culture, budgets, HR issues, political climate, and many other factors present in agencies get in the way and make the meaningful building of such programs seem out of reach, like a mirage in the desert that you cannot attain. However, today I want to introduce you to a couple of people who are able to overcome the many challenges facing agencies working to combat their staff's corrections fatigue, as we call it, and build successful programs that are thriving today. They have proven themselves able to be sustainable. So I'm going to briefly introduce to you Bob Bowen and Stephanie Rollins, and then we're going to dive right in to our content, our questions and answers. So Bob Bowen has nearly 3 decades in the corrections field. He began his career in 1988, and the rest is history. His work includes 2 states, 6 facilities, and all levels of security. Bob has developed and piloted numerous successful programs. This includes a comprehensive wellness program serving over 13,000 corrections employees. Bob loves his kids, grandchildren, cats, and Harley Davidsons. A nice combination. I don't know if you take your cat for rides, Harley, Bob, but I can imagine that. Bob enjoys a good adventure and is known to show up in somewhat obscure places just to say, I've been there. Bob is especially grateful for the mission of the WCO and is happy to serve on its executive board. And thank you, Bob, for that. And Stephanie Rollins has a dozen years of correctional experience with specific expertise in the area of developing, implementing, and overseeing staff wellness programming in large correctional organizations, including building and deploying a trauma response unit for staff. She previously served as a staff wellness program administrator for a large state correctional system. In addition to her involvement with Desert Waters, Stephanie serves as a consultant for correctional wellness and training and as director of workforce wellness for a large state child welfare agency. She holds a master's of science degree in criminal justice sciences from Illinois State University. And now, before we start, I am going to invite you to post questions in the chat as we go along with our panel discussion. And at the end, Bob and Stephanie will answer as many as they can. Our session is going to be an hour. We're going to be recording it. So if you must leave before the end, you can find it posted to our YouTube channel soon. And if you need to go at the hour, please go ahead. But we're going to stay for another 20 minutes or so if there are further questions to be answered, so we cover as many as we can. So now we're ready to dive in. So let me ask you first, what led you in the middle of your busy lives working in corrections to identify a need, and not only identify the need for staff wellness issues and responses, but to step up and do something about it, not just be a spectator or somebody who talks about there being a problem? What led you to take action?
Well, let me first thank Desert Waters and Katerina for hosting this, and thank everybody on the Zoom call today, and for your interest and your courage to either work in this or address these concerns. And hopefully we can help you a little bit today to accomplish some of your challenges. So what brought me to to my interest and to my desire to do something in regards to staff wellness. There were a couple things, honestly. One is some personal trauma. I went through a really difficult divorce where I heard a lot of people say, you have changed. You're not the same person. At the time, I was a senior administrator at a correctional facility and had been for several years. And I was stressed. I'm sure stressed to the max about all the things that were going on at the time. And as we all know, although many of our employees say, "Well, it doesn't really bother me," and I'm the same person, if they're truthful with themselves, the work in corrections changes who we are and how we deal with people, how we deal with our families. So that was the first thing, and I think within a couple of years after that, after I'd gone through a divorce, I went through some time and some reflection and realized, maybe there's something to this. Maybe, maybe I do need to take a look inwardly and see how I've been treating people and how I've been treating myself. That was the first thing, and then while being, I was a superintendent of a maximum security juvenile facility, and we had a very serious assault and an escape that really rocked the staff. They'd gone through several years of not having anything like this, and had kind of been forgotten. And as time went on after that, I felt like the person who everyone really, but especially the person who was assaulted, maybe got kind of left in a limbo. We call folks and we say, "Hey, just checking on you. How are you doing?" Well, most people's first response is, "Fine, I'm fine. I'm doing fine." Well, the truth is she wasn't doing fine, and to her close personal friends who I was in touch with in the facility, they relayed that. And at that point, I really started to go, we're leaving something out here, and we have all these programs for the people in our charge that address anger management and parenting and thinking for a change and all the other things that we do. And what are we doing for staff? What are we doing for staff to send them home where they can have positive family relationships and where they can have positive relationships with other people in their life? So when I came back to my home state and I got an opportunity to impact, mostly through my position, to impact the employees that were under my care, I started to look what was out there, and at that point, we identified a team of individuals, and we went from there and continued building this wellness process.
Right. Right. Thank you. Stephanie?
Well, and I'm going to pick up the story where Bob kind of left off. I was one of those employees that he found. Um, and my story is just that I had been working in a facility for 4.5, 5 years at that point, and I had decided that the shift work of it and just kind of the fatigue and the burnout had really set in pretty significantly for me at that point. And so I had an opportunity to take a position at headquarters. And it just kind of was, kind of serendipitous that the person next to me in the next cubicle at headquarters, we were the only people that had come out of facilities that worked in our area. And we both kind of started eating lunch together. And I think it was just because we were both really unnerved at working outside of a correctional facility at that point. We shared a lot of the same fatigue. What was funny was we started eating lunch together, and we both commented how the quiet of the area in which we worked was to the point that we both were having anxiety over working in such a quiet environment. It was deathly silent after being in a facility for so many years. That really got to us. And so we started eating lunch together and kind of started having these conversations about I was very vocal and without a filter talking about how the agency didn't do enough for staff inside of institutions, that there was so many things that could be done for the benefit and the wellness of staff. And this individual said, well, I know a guy that's kind of looking to affect that change. I did not know at the time that she knew who Bob was. And so Bob kind of cut us loose to go build what initially became a morale committee. And the morale committee, I think, we started where a lot of agencies start, like, hey, let's have some morale building activities. Let's play dodgeball. Let's have a chili cook-off. Let's do those things. But I think pretty quickly our committee realized that there was a whole lot more depth to this issue than fun and games. And while fun and games are great, they do not constitute a comprehensive wellness program. And it wasn't until we ended up hearing about a facility in a particular part of the state that had 3 or 4 different employees pass away in a 6-week period of time, and they were really hurting. And one was suicide, one was a heart attack, and one was, I think, another medical condition. And then there was a child who had died by suicide of one of the employees during that time too. And we didn't know what to do. So we ended up taking candy bars. It was August, it was hot. It was one of those things where you're walking out of the facility and you're getting ready to get in your car that's 200 degrees and it's just like icky and muggy. And we didn't know what to do. So we took them candy bars and bottles of ice water and drinks. And we wrapped EAP information around the candy bar. Now, we knew at the time that our EAP reputation was garbage, but it was something. It was all we had at that time. And so we ended up handing these candy bars out, and that whole event, that whole response ended up triggering a discussion of that morale committee about what else can we do, because this is not it. And so what was really cool about it was that our morale committee, we had intentionally recruited people that were of high esteem in the department. We had people from, kind of our special teams that, just people really looked up to. It was kind of a career goal to be on one of those teams. We had the leadership of those teams. We had people that worked in facilities around the state. We had people that had large amounts of experience in maximum security facilities, and we had non-security people that were represented as well on that committee. And I think it just really triggered a discussion about, well, what happens after we run a special operation and maybe an incident occurs out of that? Or like, what do we do for staff following a situation of violence or something in the institution? And I mean, we were joking about it when we were having it, but it was like, well, see you Monday, like, have a good weekend. There was nothing. And so I think that team that got started had no idea the initiative, the project, the impact, the sacrifice, the struggle, the triumph that we were biting off in that moment. But it started with some candy bars and bottles of water at a facility that had some just real tragic deaths that had occurred recently. And we realized out of that the need was not going to be satisfied with a candy bar and a bottle of water and a slap on the back and a chili cook-off later. While those things were great, they could not be the only things.
Yes, we need a comprehensive approach. Wonderful. So you started very, very small, no idea how deep of an ocean you were stepping into and swimming into. So how did you get started logistically on the practical side?
Yeah,
Bob?
so Stephanie alluded to it earlier, and I think it's overlooked, especially in employee groups, large number of employee groups, right? There's a need to create a buzz, and in fact, I use that term. Get people talking about what's going on, and the morale group kind of got people, hey, something's going on. There's maybe things are getting ready to change. Maybe there's some opportunity here. So that was really important to the logistical part of it, although you wouldn't maybe define it as logistical, but that communication flow, that opportunity to have first hand-to-hand or mouth-to-mouth communication with groups of employees was really important. You have to have a supportive administration, and like they have to be all in. Administrators and managers have to have courage and be fearless about progressing. And again, that's more a personality type than a definition of the word logistics, but it's so important in getting the program, the comprehensive program rolling. So your administration has to be committed, at least those far enough up the food chain that people respect the process or the decision that's made. So those things are really important. And then logistically, I think there were three things that had to be developed to cover the majority of the real need and could be built off of. One was the morale side of things that Stephanie spoke about. We started a group that we had dodgeball tournaments and we did chili cook-offs. The next thing was the process for critical incidents, addressing critical incidents as they occur. And the third was the Desert Waters side of it, the corrections fatigue, where all the things that came before it, could be effectively addressed, or at least we would attempt to address them for those that wanted a part of it. So logistically, really the administration, having the administration saying, we're going to invest, we're going to spend some money. And quite honestly, I don't believe we spent more than $35,000 for an agency, it covered the entire state, close to 400 miles between our furthest facility in the south and the furthest northern facility. And the majority of it was volunteer. And I'm getting into other questions here, but you have to have an administration willing to make an investment. And then you have to be strategic in your process. Where are you starting at? Where do you want to be? And follow the steps in between. So.
Great. So you had the plan, a roadmap. Stephanie, thank you.
I want to clarify just the word volunteer is that people volunteered to be on the team. We made it, one of the biggest support things that administration made available to us is that people did these things on paid time. They were not required to attend training on their days off. We did not respond to incident on vacation time. We did not make people use leave. These activities, they were volunteers to be a part of them, to serve their peers, but they were not volunteering their time. This was, we were making these staff available during their working hours. And so I wanted to provide that important clarification, because I've had some agencies in the last few years reach out to me and be like, hey, so do you have people do this, on their weekends? And the answer is no. You're not communicating that staff are worthy of a wellness program if they're doing it, if they're having to take their own time off the clock, that should be spent with family or other activities. So so that was a huge part of that logistically, is that we decided this was going to be part of the workday, part of the workplace culture. And I remember one of the things we decided, it was going to be woven into the fabric of the agency. And I think Bob actually coined that phrase. And what that meant for us was that it was going to be in policy development, that was going to be in the training that we did for everything in the agency. We were going to start to coordinate wellness into onboarding training for our cadets. We were going to start to, and all of these things took time. But I think really the first launching point was just that what we heard from the ground, that is, if you don't write it into policy, nobody's going to do it. And so we put a group of people together that we thought were going to be thoughtful and honest and really think about what a policy should look like, what was doable, what was not doable, what we thought we could manage as an agency. We wanted to be high level, but but also offer enough detail that folks knew how this was going to function. You don't want to get too granular because it's a brand new program. You don't know what you're going to have to revise. So I think we were very thoughtful about policy development. But I'm just, as a point of example, the other thing that we did was we just jumped in and we were baptized by fire. And so the first thing that we did was we identified the training, and we ended up choosing critical incident stress management, and we had our staff head out to the Nebraska Department of Corrections because they were actually putting on the training. This was in 2017. So if anybody's from Nebraska, shout out to you guys. You really helped us get rolling there. And we ended up returning back to our academy late after I think we were gone 3 days. And we ended up returning back to our academy, and we had a fresh class of cadets that were at that academy. And there was a lot of conversation on the drive home. We were several states away, so we had some time. And there was just a lot of conversation. We're like, okay, we got this training. Like, how are we going to implement it? What are we going to do? We got to think of all these things. We got to check all these boxes. And as we rolled up to the academy, we had rescue squads lined down the street, and we were made aware that our security guard, our overnight security guard that sits the desk in our dorms for our cadets, had had a heart attack, and the cadets had tried to revive him via CPR, and unfortunately that individual ended up passing away. And I think every single one of us, there were 17 of us that attended that training, in that moment realized we can't wait to check the boxes, to figure this out so that it just runs perfectly and smoothly. We did our first critical incident stress debriefing with those staff the next day, because I think there was a realization that those employees were starting their career before they even made it to a facility with an incredibly traumatic event. And that was the pace that their career was going to take, was before we could even get them into a facility. They were having somebody that they considered a leader, pass away right in front of them. And so, the idea that trauma was present for them already was hugely motivating for us to get rolling. I also just want to say that of the 17 people that we sent to that training, we took the chief of staff, we took 2 wardens, we took leadership on special teams, and we took about 10 line staff, correctional officers, and non-security staff from facilities all across the state. And I think that made an incredible difference when we started to plan logistics, because we had everybody at the table. We had every area of the agency represented.
Great. Thank you. My goodness. So what steps did you take once you started rolling out your programs, your trainings, whatever other programs you had? What steps did you take for quality assurance of the programs you were rolling out?
Yeah, so firstly, and those of you that are listening in now, are many of you are going to be familiar with the term fidelity. Stephanie and I both pushed that because it's important, especially in an agency like any corrections agency, any size state, no matter how big they are. We develop these programs. They're put together by experts who spend the time answering all the questions, and many times people want to throw their own spin on it, right? Well, I don't necessarily agree with that, but let's, maybe we can twist this up somehow. That was unacceptable. They knew it. Every time I spoke to the group, I pushed fidelity to the program. We're going to keep it consistent. We're going to apply. Don't bring your personal feelings in. Don't bring your thoughts in. And one of the things that we didn't do, and I didn't think about this till recently, we didn't. Sorry, psychologists, psychiatrists that are listening in, but we didn't bring a lot of you along with us, because sometimes you're difficult to retrain, and so the majority of our people. However, we did use our agency psychologists and psychiatrists to train our staff in other things. But as far as the presentation of the Desert Waters and the work inside the facilities, we steered clear of them. So we constantly reviewed what was going on. And one of the things in my career that I've been involved with in private sector and public sector both is quality assurance, continuous quality improvement. It comes under all sorts of names, but one of the catchphrases in it is referred to as the Gemba. So you go to the Gemba in quality assurance. The Gemba in Japanese means the place where work is done. So we regularly attended training. We, meaning the leaders in the group, Stephanie, myself, and other leaders, the high-level administrators and managers that wanted to participate. We asked them to stop in and listen in and to see what was going on and to hear the complaints, hear the concerns. So I think the biggest thing for any wellness program that's comprehensive is you have to include what your employees are interested in. They have to have their say. They need to be able to say, it's coming up short, or can we consider this? What that leads you, in my opinion, and Katerina may have data to support it, I don't know, but you move from one kind of focus, and in our case, we've recently moved to a family. We've started to include family, because what's happening is people are participating in the CF2F program, the Corrections Fatigue to Fulfillment, and they're going, wow, this is great. I wish my wife or I wish my kids could hear this story. So if nobody's ever there listening to what is happening, if nobody's there asking people, what do you think? How did this sit with you? Then you never kind of adjust. It's a living organism, and it needs fed, and it needs to grow. And so, the biggest thing I think is constantly looking at it and going to work where the work is done and listening to what people are saying about what we're providing.
Great, thank you. Stephanie?
Yeah, I think one of the other big pieces of QA that we did was when we rolled something out, we had a process for determining whether or not it was being successful or what barriers were going to be present. We had an application process to be on the wellness team. That application process required an interview. My goodness, I remember we traveled the state for like 6 months, the interview panel. And I think we interviewed over the course of a couple of years, maybe 500 or 600 staff. Our team ended up being around 225. And we showed up at responses, those of us that were kind of on the leadership team building this thing. And what's funny is it's not like we really knew better than those doing it. We were at the same level of training and starting gate as everybody else. But what we did know was that there had to be, going back to what Bob said, there had to be a fidelity to the process. And since we were kind of the ones that were, pushing the effort, it had to be us. And so we were showing up to critical incident stress debriefings and making sure that things were, making sure that logistically it was happening the way it was supposed to, making sure that facilitators had what they needed, making sure that wardens understood that people had to be relieved from posts. We showed up to any wellness training that we had. We showed up. Every trainer went through a really vigorous practice process and then a coaching and pairing process with a veteran instructor for a period of time before they were signed off on to deliver the curriculum. And every single instructor knew that somebody could drop in and observe them. And, what Bob was mentioning about, having your own agenda, you could bring your story, but you couldn't bring your own agenda. And, we ensured that, if we were stopping in, as an instructor, our instructors were aware they had to be, in the right place on the curriculum. And that was not a method of micromanagement or control or anything other than, I think everybody knew that our credibility was at stake because we were a new team, we were a new program, and we had no street cred, we had no trust. We had a bunch of very suspicious correctional employees who had been who had their own negative experiences with talking about trauma, mental health, EAP, all of those things. And we knew that everything that came out of our mouths, every class that we did, every response that we offered after trauma, our reputation was on trial. Our buy-in was on trial. Our whether or not we continued to exist was on trial. And so it probably appears that we were micromanaging it. And I can tell you absolutely at the beginning we were, because we knew how fragile the infant was, and we knew that we had to nurture and protect. And or the program would die, like many correctional programs had before it. And we had people that were actively against this. And so I think it was just kind of the context of um everybody who signed on for this knew what the expectation was. So luckily we had the right people, and we didn't have to, there was no struggles around, well, I think we should do it this way. Everybody understood what was at stake. And we had employees who were making decisions to end their life. We knew that was at stake too.
That's so true. Yes. So, and I was very impressed by your approach. You are the only state I've seen that took so many steps to protect the fidelity, to protect the quality of the material to be effective. Otherwise, you wouldn't be effective, to be watering it down. So what would you say, looking back, what is the biggest factor, the biggest contributor to success for your program? Because you experienced sustainable success. So what has been the biggest factor to that?
Yeah. So people are watching all the time. They're watching how you carry yourself. They're watching to see if you are doing what you say and saying what you do, and it's all connected to trust. And in whatever life's work or relationship, effective relationship, positive relationship, um, organizational leadership, volunteerism, whatever, it's all connected to trust. So we did a really good job of building trust. I would stand in front of groups as we early on when we were training, and Stephanie, Stephanie's involvement in this was way more granular than I, and I was more along the line of, what do you need to make this happen? How can I help you? But we would sit in front of groups, or I'd stand in front of groups that conducting our quarterly training, and we would talk about, not talking about what happened, either in a critical incident stress debrief, or in a corrections fatigue to fulfillment, or in anything that our team members would be involved with line staff that weren't directly involved. And we would say to them, or I would say it with me, everybody, I just can't talk about it. And then I would make everybody say, I just can't talk about it. Because as everyone knows, in corrections, we like to gossip. We like to tell tales. We like to find out what's going on. So we train people early on to not speak outside the circle of our effort, and so that staff could feel good about coming there. And in the 5 years that I was directly involved with it, never was I approached by anyone. And I don't know if Stephanie was either, but I can't say that we ever had a conversation where anybody came to me and said, she or he said this about me away from what was going on. And I think starting with a team that is trustworthy, as Stephanie alluded to earlier, people that are respected, people that are revered in the facilities. I'm not talking about leadership. I'm talking about people lead from the back all the time. Some of the best leaders I've ever worked with were correctional officers or youth supervisors, and they had no rank. But when something happened, they were followed. There was no question who was in charge. And I think we did a good job building a team with people with that kind of nature, that kind of respect, that kind of willingness. to commit to the process. And people went, well, you know, if Stephanie Rawlings is in it, it must be okay. Or Brittany Ott, or Michael Lacey, or Chuck Mattmiller, or all the names that I could sit here and run down for the next 30 minutes. That's who we picked. And so trust, I think, is the biggest. Developing that trust and maintaining the trust after you get started is probably the biggest impact to your success.
Yeah, so Bob took mine. That was going to be my number one.
Sorry.
So I'm going to supplement. No, it's yours to have. I cannot just know that that is the biggest impact to your success is choosing the right people. I'm going to provide some secondary success measures second only to that, but practically speaking, the other thing that we did, and I think this is a real challenge for a lot of correctional agencies, as I've gotten into consulting and training in the last few years, I see a lot of agencies that rush to the reactive measures and they forget to get on the front end and build in preventative measures. And so I call it my offense and defense. You got to play both at the same time. So your trauma response unit is your defense. Something bad's happened. But what are we building on the front end to help build resilience? And that was really kind of the training and wellness education piece that was really instrumental in serving that role for us. I think the other thing too is that we leverage the resources that we already had, regardless of EAP's reputation and how staff felt about it. We started to try to rebuild the reputation of EAP because in reality, you still need your mental health professionals. You still need that. We were never trying to replace that. We were trying to build in a peer support pipeline to those mental health professionals. And Bob alluded earlier that we sort of sidestepped incorporating a lot of our inmate mental health professionals that were operating within the facility. And I think a good clarification there too was that we had a culture of adversarial tone to it between security and mental health professionals at the time due to consent decrees and mandatory training. And so I think when we did add those individuals in, they provided a really invaluable tool to us as far as how to guide our training. How, what gaps were we missing? When we were thinking about our critical incident responses, were there things that we were missing? And so they really were kind of also leading us from the back, those individuals. We did not put them squarely out in front of staff. And that was a very particular agency issue that we had at the time. I think the other thing too that was really imperative to our success is that we had people on our team that understood this was not going to flip a switch overnight. This was going to be a multi-year, huge construction project that different people were going to come in and shine at different phases of the project. And when I say shine, I just mean, a lot of times you've got to have process people and you've got to have people, and you got to have them both, and they got to be able to work in tandem together. And I think lastly, as we were thinking about this question, is that we just showed up for stuff. We had a facility that was pretty far away in a very rural area. That didn't, I mean, it was just kind of the forgotten facility, but it was also our facility that had our psychiatric unit on it. And they just had a very difficult season over about a 2-year span. I believe they had 4 employees die by suicide in 24 months. And this facility was not huge. And so we took a group of people, including Bob as chief of staff at the time, up to that facility, and we walked around that facility for 3 straight shifts. We spent 18 hours there, and we sat in bubbles with people. We stood on posts with them, and we just walked the facility and tried to let them know that they were not this forgotten rural facility that nobody cared about. And we let them know that what they did mattered and that we were thinking of them and that we could not imagine losing coworkers in the manner that they did. And I think it was stuff like that. I mean, we were doing that on a regular basis. I think it was stuff like that that really communicated that this program was going to be different. than other things. The program was going to be full of people that had relatable experience and that were really doing the same job they were doing somewhere else, and they really got it, and that they cared enough to drive in the middle of the night to go spend time with them. And there were people choosing the right people also meant people that were willing to prioritize their coworkers and their relationships with those people, and that just cared. And so I think that was just really, the pinnacle of our success was who we chose, and how we leveraged things that we already had.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. And one thing I like to go back to in my mind is that to be able to leverage the right people, and you have to know your right people, so you have to spend time with those people to know who to pick. So that's kind of a step that one needs to take first. You don't just pull numbers out of a hat. So how did you overcome the barriers that you must have encountered? Because we know this is a rough road for most agencies. How did you overcome barriers?
Yeah, I would say that our, and I'm not going to steal the 33 stuff, does a good job talking about that. But, I'd say the biggest barrier was naysayers. And then this is an interesting part of our personality, and when we work in corrections, um, people like to, doubt, and then you know bring a hesitancy or say negative things, and um, maybe I don't understand it. I'm a generally positive person, and I I'm not interested in getting back or um, you know tattling or whatever. But we seem to have a lot of people that work in corrections that get kind of stuck in that, and I think it's part of the work. I think it's part of the fatigue, and I think that was a barrier that we had. Convincing people that that this was helpful, and then over time, what was amazing, was the number of people that came to me or Stephanie or any of the team members and said, I kind of thought this was a bunch of hooey, but I'm glad I went. And every time you pull that one person, they impact. There's a mathematical equation for it, right? One negative comment affects 10 more people, who each affect 10 more people. And so, the more people we could bring to the table the conversation about wellness, the more people that change their minds, the easier the process got. But far and away, I would say that was the biggest barrier. We were really lucky in that we had a director who was supportive, pretty much let uh, the team, the core team, do whatever we wanted. And the money, since we weren't spending a bunch of money, it wasn't particularly that big a deal. Or the agency had $1 billion budget. So what, you spend $50,000 a year on making things better for staff, and that made things a lot easier as well. So the big thing, I think, the big barrier was convincing people that it was pure and honest, and it wasn't, that there was nothing negative hidden behind it, and that they somehow weren't going to get in trouble, they weren't going to get in trouble because they were honest with something. And again, that comes back to trust and the collective effort to ensure everyone involved, understood what made trust. So for me, I would identify that as the biggest barrier. At the time, though, I was the second person in command for the entire agency. It made it easy to go, hey, we're going to do this and get out of the way, but we took a much more practical and strategic approach to things, and we eventually won a lot of people over. So for me, that was it.
Great. So you
Yeah.
had to over hopelessness, people's hopelessness, but there was hope. Yes, Stephanie?
I was gonna say, yeah, I'll get to our multi-level marketing scheme that we came up with as we got rolling, but Bob kind of started that conversation. Is that I think one of the biggest barriers that we had was just trust, and we've already kind of talked about that. Like, Oh, wellness. I knew what I signed up for, code of silence, all the things that I think everybody on this webinar already knows about mental health of first responders. But one of the things that we decided was we were going to fight the temptation from day one to go after and specifically target the people that we knew were most resistant to what we were doing. And so we did the 33 33 33 rule. So we went and gathered up and focused all of our efforts in the first year on people that we already knew were bought into this. They were signing up for the classes. We didn't mandate anything. Everything was voluntary. We kept classes full. We kept the wait list full. And then our multi-level marketing scheme came through for us. Whereas all of those people that would come to those classes, they would go back, they would tell 3 or 4 of their coworkers, and then we would see a jump in the next class waiting list. And we never got to the point at all in any of those first several years where we had to cancel classes for lack of interest. That just didn't happen. And it was actually kind of wondrous to watch, because we had people that hated the idea of wellness when we rolled out the gate. They literally, you could tell they were disgusted by the whole thing. And so we went and got all of our, our 33% of people that were bought in. And then we knew that we had 33% of people that were sitting the fence. So after we went and gathered our posse, and we went and got the ones on the fence next. And then, I think everybody knows now you got the majority. And so we started to hear a lot of that naysaying start to reduce. And I remember early on, one of the first classes I taught, y'all been in that space where you get your rear end handed to you in front of people. Me and another instructor were running a wellness class, and we had that happen. And it was early on, we were still new to the material, and I said, this guy showed up and he was prepared. Like, he came for us and he had our number, and we were not ready to sit in that space where we knew how to facilitate that. And we ended up getting through it. I mean, we just kept pressing forward. I mean, every slide, it was another argument. Everything, it was one of those days that at the end of the day, it felt like 14 years had gone by. And I will never forget, it was probably 3 or 4 years later, I had moved on from it. I forgot about him. It was, lesson learned early. He somehow made contact with one of our team members. And he sent word to us and he said, I want you to tell them 2 people that trained my class that day that I apologize, that I have now personally experienced or seen a coworker. I'm not sure if it was for himself or a coworker, how that curriculum can save lives. And I was completely blown away, because there's not a lot of data points that you can really look for the impact of your wellness program. I mean, there's the suicide rate, but that's that's a really dark data point, right? Like, that's a really ugly measure of the success of a program. And I think just stories like that, and working through those barriers. I think the original question here was, how did you overcome your barriers? We didn't give up. That was a part of it. We took every barrier in stride. We did the best we could to adjust, adapt, create responses around it. Some of the other barriers that we had at the time was, we had unrelated department drama. And y'all know what I'm talking about here. Especially if you're dealing in a state, we had labor union contracts that were expired, and our staff were working without a contract. We had a situation in our state where employees were contractually due raises, some of them for as many as 6 or 7 years, and they had not been paid those raises. We were operating under numerous consent decrees. We had mandatory trainings running as a result of lawsuits. We just had a lot of other kind of, regular occurring state government, operational, I'm calling it drama, but challenges. And no matter what, I think the biggest way that we got around that is that the people that we recruited to be a part of this effort, they were affected by those same things. I was standing in front of staff instructing courses, and I was due um I was due my raises too, and I hadn't gotten them. And so I think we started off each class and said, hey, like, this is about what we can control, our wellness. This is about the tools that we can have for those things today. We know these other things are going on. We're just going to park them over here for the day, and we're not going to talk about them because there's not a thing that any one of us can do. Nobody's got a pipeline down to the legislature. Nobody has a checkbook in their hand and can make your raises appear. So we just we had people that were able to navigate those other additional challenges in a really kind of eloquent way, but also at the same time, they were being impacted by the same things. And I think that really mattered to our staff, is that I wasn't standing, we, the team that was implementing, we weren't standing in front of them blowing smoke at them. Like, we were being impacted by those same things. We were going home at the end of the day with the same issues. And I think that really was a key to overcoming those particular kind of political and, bureaucratic challenges that we were having at the same time.
Thank you, thank you. And focusing on what you can control, as opposed to chasing rabbits about what you cannot control and just complaining helplessly. So that is a very, very good strategy. What you can control, very empowering. So if you could go back, if you could redo the whole thing, what would you do differently, if anything?
For me, it would have been to get the facility leadership immersed in the process, train. Although we really tried to focus on this effort being a bottom up with the top supporting. We really needed wardens and assistant wardens, deputy directors, department heads. We needed them. We needed that 66%, the 33% that were with it, and the 33% that were sitting on the fence. We needed them fully engaged, and then the last 33% would come along, hopefully. So if I was going to do anything different, I would say I would make sure I would get them trained early before, because it's difficult for, I had experiences where a team leader, a training team leader would call me and say, hey, facility XYZ is saying that people can't go to training, even though I'd sent out and said, we understand there may be overtime created as a result of this. So this is where courage comes in, folks. This is where saying doing the right thing is more important than saying, oh, okay, just turning your back or wishing it'd go away. We needed to do the right thing, and luckily the agency's still doing the right thing. But the needing the wardens and senior staff to understand that it was important was really something that I would have done earlier on. And even as time went on, even 5 years down the road from when we started this whole process, we still have people that haven't been trained in it, and it's available to them. Usually twice a year, we train administrators, or we were training administrators. So, that's important to the overall success. If your warden knows it's good for everybody, then your staff will respond accordingly. And I supported them, in that they didn't get hit on over overtime issues. They didn't get hit on over staffing issues. So that for me would be the most important thing that I would change.
Thank you, Steph. And we have a few minutes left, and then we're going to respond to questions if people can stay. We have about 5 minutes. Go.
I'm going to be very quick with this. The thing that I would do differently is that I did not build enough supports, out of ignorance. I mean, I was running into the fire with everybody else, not knowing what I was doing, learning along the way. I did not build enough supports for the people that were going to be on the wellness team. I wish I had done a better job of thinking about what they were going to be putting into their bucket while they were also working in those facilities, experiencing the same things. So I would go back. And I see a couple of my friends on this chat today from other states that work in this, that work in this wellness stuff. And I know that we've had some conversations over the years about, you know, not forgetting to take care of your caretakers. And if I would go back and do it differently, I would have been, you know, at the time, you don't know what you don't know. Upon reflection, I see that that was a real gap. We went running into the fire with no regard, for what it was going to cost any of us. And so I think that's probably the biggest thing.
Your firefighters, they don't have a fireproof suit.
Right.
So a lot of exposure to not only the indirect trauma, but a lot of stress, a lot of negativity, a lot of exposure, where they would need a ton of debriefing on a regular basis. Yes. So that's something that obviously now you know, hopefully it will be put in place. So, so I think this is a good spot to stop and respond to questions or there was one question, and then we had some comments. A question from one person was, what did the training and or the wellness program include? What were the components of your training?
So initially, the training that we went through was critical incident stress management, and I believe that we chose the Jeffrey Mitchell model, if that's familiar to you all. I know that there's a few different models available. We chose a you know, that peer-led crisis intervention system. I think that you've got to have a response to trauma, and that really was our defensive strategy. The second thing that we did, the curriculum that we implemented, was we did procure the Desert Waters Correctional Fatigue to Fulfillment training. And then later on, we actually added the True Grit training, although we did not roll that out widespread. What it really did then assist with was the leadership of the staff wellness program kind of got that bump up on building resilience. So we did kind of do one thing for the team that was leading in the True Grit training, but we did not roll it out to direct delivery for staff at the time. We did not have the manpower. When COVID hit, we added a podcast, a wellness podcast, that staff could connect with, and we brought in guest speakers and covered all kinds of topics. We started a staff wellness Facebook group, private. We screened every single person that we added against HR records. They had to complete some questions before they could be added to that. We moderated wellness topics, and also we had a couple of staff that used it to ask for help. So that was kind of at that time a big tool, I think, that had an unexpected positive impact. We added the that agency, since I have departed, has continued to build upon their program. As Bob said, they've added supports for family wellness now. They have a curriculum for family wellness, also from Desert Waters. And additionally, they have rolled out, we were at the beginning of this before I took a new role. They were at the beginning of rolling out a wellness day at the facilities, in which they shut down the facility to basically bare bones operation, and they kind of lock it down, and they spend an entire day rotating staff off their posts that participate in a 2-hour wellness exercise that they have designed. And additionally, on those days, they offer the staff a relief from their post to discuss it after they go through the 2-hour training, and then they bring in a lunch that's usually served a lot of times, I think, by their labor union local or another employee benefit committee or some such. You know, they provide lunch for those employees. So the employees really get to participate in about a half-day wellness exercise. And you know, for my buddies that are still involved with that, they have spoken very, very highly about it. The agency that I'm serving now, one of the things that we're looking at adding, and I see some of my buddies on here that have done this in the past, is that we're looking at adding now a post-critical incident seminar. That is with the agency that I'm with now, and that is a 3-day seminar that can include family members, that really starts to dig into actually treatment centered. And that is, those are your mental health professionals that are coming in, talking about that trauma, talking about incidents, engaging in some therapeutic measures. I know EMDR is a big part of the PCIS process. So really, I know some agencies have also brought in Cortico and different vendors from that. So when you're really looking at a comprehensive wellness program, the elements that you need to have covered are your reactionary parts and your prevention parts. And so that's when we talk about what elements you had, that was a big part of it. I also saw a question in the chat real quickly. I can answer very quickly. Our training was rolled out to parole, correctional staff. We rolled it out to everybody. I saw Nicole had asked that question up there. That's the cool thing. Desert Waters actually has a version of CF2F for parole and community-based corrections. And so we actually gathered a wellness team for the parole division of our agency too, and we made sure that they could deliver both critical incident stress management and our CF2F program to their peers in parole. So we did not segregate that part of our agency at all. They were included.
Would you like to say
If,
something?
if
I mean, go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, I just two things that are that we did. We took Stephanie Miss, and she covered it all, right? But early on we tried to engage our team members with additional training. We ran twice a year. I don't remember what we called them, Stephanie, but we used all the mental health professionals and people at the facilities who had experience doing other things. We brought them into one location. We brought in every team member, spent the whole day. Getting trained up, understanding all the other, not just the wellness aspects, but lots of interesting stuff that we did training on. The other thing that I was particularly proud about that I started, and then after I left this position I was in at the time, it was continued by the person that followed me. But the agency worked through their insurance provider, and we got blood pressure and body mass and all the other thing. We got a machine at every facility. It was free. And if you haven't, if you have someone like, help me out, Stephanie, who was our insurer? Anyway,
Machine was called a Higgy machine,
yeah, it was
HIG.
called a Higgy. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was absolutely free. They brought them in. All we had to do was run a data line. Everybody's got data lines all around their facilities. I would imagine that most insurance companies, health insurance companies, are following in that. That actually had an impact on a number of staff. One guy at one facility that I had previously been the warden, literally got in an ambulance after he sat down on the machine, and they called nurses up, and he was on death's door. And if it hadn't been for that, he probably would have gone home and had something terrible happen. So that's an opportunity for the physical part, and I think that's all something that comes along, like Stephanie said earlier about the first aspect's the response, and then the second is the mental, emotional, and you got to include that physical eventually. But usually, if the mental and emotional comes along, the physical comes along with it too. But those machines are available, and I'm sure in most states, put a little pressure on your provider, and one will magically appear. We got them in all our facilities, 29 facilities. So
I want to address the other thing we forgot too is for the physical wellness, we got into an agreement with our division of, our central management, HR agency for the state. They bought and paid for a fitness app competition. It was called Coast to Coast. And our staff were able to register little teams at their facilities. And for 6 weeks, they engaged in like little physical fitness competitions using their steps. And this app also had access to healthy recipes. And they went through these little competitions, and then they gave us swag bags at the end to award to the top teams. And we had about eight or 900 staff that registered for that, which was really good for first time out. And so that sort of addressed that. Katarina, if you will, I know we're running low on time. There is a really important comment that I want to address to the group before we move on about the relationship with wellness team and unions. I want to say that we came from one of the strongest union states, stating this up at the time, and you are absolutely right. There are critical conversations that need to happen between union leadership and the agency administration regarding how wellness services will be implemented and how how we selected our teams. We had memos of understanding with them. They were brought in on those conversations. I think if we would go back and do it over again, I've heard Bob comment that maybe we would have brought them in a little earlier than we thought, but again, we were kind of running into the fire. Bob, did you want to comment anything on the way that we kind of navigated the union partnership?
Yeah. I think I think you covered it, right? They want to be part of they want to be part of it, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's and in our case, they eventually were helpful.
Oh,
They invested in it at the time, as Stephanie mentioned earlier. We didn't have a contract; people hadn't gotten pay raises, so in keeping with negotiation tactics, right? The union took a hard line. Had that not been the case, we'd have been hand in hand skipping through the daisies over this. I'm convinced of that. They did push the. They don't call it employee assistance, but the labor union had a wellness phone line, and we made that part of our process. Whereas if you didn't want to call the employee assistance program that was operated by the state, you could call a union one, and they actually bolstered that as more calls came in. So it was overall, I would say it was a positive experience. But yeah, we ran into the fire. And in the end, I had several conversations where I'm like, look, you can come along, or you can wait there, but we're finishing this. We're going to finish the deal. We're going to close the deal here, and you can be part of it. I want you to be part of it, but I'm not going to wait for another Saturday morning suicide call where I sit on my bed and cry with whoever's calling me about it, which happened.
Mm.
And so that it'll work if you bring them in and you have the conversation early. You include them in the planning. Some of it we had to work around with like team selections and that kind of thing, but we got there. We got there by being honest with each other, transparent, and they gave up a little and we gave up a little. In the end, we got to where we needed to be. And Stephanie deserves credit for a lot of that because she thought through that process so that it would be palatable for everyone.
I think
So
a lot of it was the team that was standing up a lot of things, and the team that was standing up a lot of this and that was in the leadership a lot of this wellness programs. We were union members ourselves. I was a union member myself, and so it was the union membership that was leading the effort. If you want to get technical, no, not under the umbrella of a union program, but I think at the end of the day, there was a recognition that we're all on the same team and we are all tired of watching our coworkers die of heart attacks at 50 and suicide and all of the other things that come along with working in corrections. And so when we could really focus on that goal and that specific outcome of reducing those things, it was really hard to continue to be frustrated or have any kind of like power struggle. And so those things, when you really recentered and refocused on what the desired outcome was, everybody was always on the same page. That was what everybody desired. And so that really, it was definitely a great comment. And I'm really glad, I'm not sure who asked the question, but thank you for bringing that up. It matters. It matters.
yes, so that commonly held vision united people and they dropped their minor whatever differences for the most important goal, which was staff survival and wellness, so that people do enjoy their retirement, don't die before it, let alone soon after it. So thank you. And let's see if we have any other question. I don't think so. We're just a little over. I want to thank Greg for his comments too about not kicking naysayers out of the class, but working with them. And especially the correction fatigue to fulfillment, people may become defensive because they see themselves, it's like a finger on the wound, but then later they calm down because they realize there's something they can do about it, something constructive they are being taught to do to help themselves. So I want to thank everybody for showing up. I want to thank Bob and Stephanie for taking time from their extremely busy days to share this very, very precious history. And you guys were pioneers, and what you started is still going, and that's the proof of the pudding. So thank you for making time to be with us and each one teach one kind of thing, sharing the good news of coming out of hopelessness into implementation of something that will work and help save lives and create quality of life. So thank you for giving us from your wisdom and your caring and your sincere engagement. And yeah, to me, looking at you, it's like, yes, way to go. What makes the difference is really being committed and genuine in caring. It's not just, oh, they told me I have to do this. It's like, no, I'm going to put myself out there and do it because I care. So thank you all. And we're going to let you know about future webinars coming up. We are planning on one for the families and another one about the future of corrections wellness. So we'd like to see you again. Thank you. And you can, if you have any questions and additional comments, you can send them to admin@desertwaters.com or to me at Katerina@desertwaters.com. But thank you for the work you do. Thank you for the sacrifices you make. And thank you for caring for each other. So let's keep going on this journey. Thank you very, very much.